panel is about freedoms, or the freedom to write, or political nature of writing. It's also an occasion for us to talk about, or mention rather, the poets, essays, national novelists. The PEN organization has a South India chapter now, which is officially formed in September. The discussions have been happening since March, 2 years, for 2 years. And so we are trying to give a new edition. PEN has a set of concerns, but if PEN has to have a South India edition, how do we define our work? What are the kinds of concerns that will matter for us? Is something that we also want to talk about. Arshia and I and Devy are part of it, and Dr. Damo's Mozo also is part of this collective. Shall we just talk about the charter first? Arshia, we prepared a charter of objectives. Shall we read from it?
I'm trying to find the charter, but I'm being interrupted by the government demanding my Aadhaar card to do, speaking of freedoms. This is the PEN International Charter, and anybody that wants to start a PEN organization or associate themselves with a PEN organization needs to endorse this. It's very short. PEN affirms that 1. Literature knows no frontiers and must remain a common currency among people in spite of political or international upheavals. 2. In all circumstances, and particularly in time of war, works of art, the patrimony of humanity at large, should be untouched by national or political passion. You can see how long ago it's written because the word is patrimony, right? And we wonder if the patriarchy is benign. We're going to consider that this afternoon. Members of PEN should at all times use what influence they have in favor of good understanding and mutual respect between nations and people. They pledge themselves to do their utmost to dispel all hatreds and to champion the ideal of one humanity living in peace and equality in one world. PEN stands for the principle of unhampered transmission of thought within each nation and between all nations, and members pledge themselves to oppose any form of suppression of freedom of expression in the country and community to which they belong, as well as throughout the world wherever this is possible. PEN declares for a free press and opposes arbitrary censorship in times of peace. It believes that the necessary advance of the world towards a more highly organized political and economic order render a free criticism of governments, administrations, and institutions imperative. And since freedom implies voluntary restraint, members pledge themselves to oppose such evils of a free press as mendacious publication, deliberate falsehood, and distortion of facts for political and personal ends. How much more relevant could that be to our time?
The role of a writer in the Indian society, or the Asian societies, and the role of writer in Europe, they have been somewhat different historically speaking. If we go back in history by, let's say, 1,000 years, beginning with Basveshwar, Kabir, Tukaram, you name your own chosen names. These writers have left a very deep mark on all the processes of social progress. They have opened up the society, apart from expressing themselves. If we look at the history of English literature, we cannot say the same thing about Milton, Wordsworth, Browning and so on. There the social reform and social progress, the processes have been different. In India, in the last 1,000 years, I can name 3 moments. One is when the bhashas emerge, that's from the 11th century. I'm not giving precise date for all bhashas, but by and large, the entire Bhakti movement, which was not about God, it was about man, humans. The second is the Bengal, what we call the Bengal Renaissance or the Indian Renaissance, India's exposure to the modern West. And the third is the Gandhian movement or the larger freedom movement. The writer was at the forefront. Today we are once again at a turning point, and if we did not remain true to the writerly tradition in India, we would not be Indian writers. I mean, that's point one. The second point I want to make is, I don't know for how long the idea of nation is going to survive in the world. 2 centuries ago, maybe 2.5 centuries ago, the entire world changed its contract between citizens and the powers that were. Instead of divinely ordained king having the license to rule the subject, people decided that they will choose, they will decide who will rule. When this happened across, in Africa it happened later, in Asia a little earlier, in Europe a little earlier, in America a little earlier, it doesn't matter. But by and large, this was a global change. 2 ideas came up. One was freedom, the other was nation. In our country, both ideas came together. But those countries that harped on the idea of nation, nationalism, and in particular Italy and Germany, caused havoc in the middle of the 20th century in the name of nationhood. But those countries that developed, nurtured the idea of freedom, I'm not saying they were not nations, but in the center was the idea of freedom. They had to fight these other nations. You all, fully aware of that history. I don't know for how long the idea of nation will survive, but the idea of freedom will survive. In these times, our getting united need not be restricted by national boundaries. Writers do not have to be anti-national, but writers have to be open and be ready to go beyond one's own nation, which could be an accident of birth and not a matter of choice. What the caste has been, in some sense the nation has been. Because you are accidentally born there. I mean, I am mightily proud of the nation I am born in. I am not mightily proud, I am not willing even to whisper the name of the caste in which I am born. But it's the accident of birth. I think while we respect that accident of birth, we must respect even more the idea of freedom and think of human, the entire world, as our place for work, as our space for work. The place for work is India, but the space for work is humanity. And that's what every writer does. Therefore, our linkages today must go beyond the idea of nation and be international. Not international in the, I am not invoking the idea of FCRA, foreign exchange, tourism. That's not my idea of internationalism. Internationalism is what Tagore had proposed before India became independent, a universal man. I think it was not for nothing that Tagore was an active member of the Pain International. Among the Indian writers, Mulkraj Anand and Tagore, and Nissim Ezekiel, they have been our very able predecessors in Pain International. And it is not for nothing that the PAIN International writers, almost from 180 countries, agreed to come to India in the month of September 2018 to pay homage to Mahatma Gandhi. They will congregate, they will assemble at the Aga Khan Palace in Pune, where Kasturba breathed her last. Gandhi and Kasturba were arrested. So was Mahadev Desai, Gandhi's lifelong friend, and we call him secretary, but Gandhi's mind in a way. And Gandhi was released, but Kasturba and Mahadev Desai remained in prison there perpetually, forever. It is to pay homage to them that the international PAIN is coming to India, and a congress will be held in Pune. And I think the writers in India, this is after a gap of 80 years. For the last 80 years, there has not been a PAIN International Congress in India. And I think the writer community, those who love freedom in India, those who respect Gandhi in India, and those who are ready to think universally, where Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam way of thought about reality that surrounds us, must all come together to support this, not financial support, that's not what, but in terms of our community, let the world know that India speaks in several hundred tongues, India writes in several dozen languages, but at heart it is one when it comes to the question of thinking universally about man. And that's at the heart of PAIN International. Thank you.
The question that I have for all the panelists here is this dilemma that we encounter, that we want to be a liberal society. The ideals seem very much liberal, freedom to express, freedom to write, etc. But we're working out of an illiberal or not liberal society. Not just in the sense of there is no legal enforcement mechanism that will allow you freedom to write the way you want, clearly not. But in another sense, where the idea of the liberal individual hasn't been institutionalized in cultural terms, might those realities pose a different order of challenges to doing intellectual work? You just spoke on
Well, friends, I was not supposed to be on this panel because I prefer to keep away from being on panels during this festival. But I think I must express a threat that looms large for the writers' community all over this country, particularly, and it's more than ever that we feel it. Just now, Arshia read out the charter. It was written in English. And if you notice, of late we find the regional writers feel the threat all the more. The fundamentalists don't so much bother about the English language writers because they know this message will reach to certain elite community. It will not percolate down to the masses. And that is why we find the regional writers facing the threat all the more. And this is precisely why this charter, should go to the regional language leaders. And I think we have discussed this earlier. And in view of that, I had already translated into Konkani and it was published in Bangargui, the Konkani daily here. But I think it is necessary that this message goes to the readers rather than writers, because we endeavor to protect the legacy of writers, freedom of speech and literature and everything. But then the readers are not aware of it. So I think it is necessary that we take this message to the readers. So then only our solidity will become more solid rather. You understand what I mean? In view of this, I think what is of paramount importance is to garner the support of the masses, of the people in general.
Thank you, Manzo. I think that what you said is really quite critical. That it's pen may be an organization for writers, but what pen does, or what pen can potentially do, is something that more people need to know about. Readers, we can call them, more interested people, because this is where the pushback has to start, right? That the illiberal mind, or the liberal, non-liberal mind, or the liberal individual, we have to stand up now and be counted. We have to show that whatever freedoms have been taken away from us, and they are being eroded steadily, that we're going to ask for them back, right? So to that extent, the more people that know what pen can do, the more solidarity we will experience, the more solidarity we can count on.
I respond to your question about the illiberal ecology of liberal minds at the moment. And
even at the time of Bhakti movement,
yes,
the three moments you picked out, I think they were surrounded by a non-liberal ecology. Non-liberal, it's not here.
so to that, Shakespeare had the best answer when he wrote that line, that it is not in our stars but in ourselves that we are under things around us. That we not invested enough in liberal ideas and taking them to the society and doing enough of prabodhan, that we thought that formal institutions might take care of the liberal atmosphere. Institutions like the judiciary, the university system, the media to some extent. But there's something more that needs to be done in a society which has inherited history, legacy of several thousand years, very deep-rooted stereotypes, very deep-rooted identity markers, and economic entanglement of domination and suffrage. Actually, I think it is time for us to engage with communities, small groups, children, wherever we can, whoever we are. Actually, in Dakshinayana, which is a loose unity of writers, it's not an organization of writers. I suggested to writers in Dakshinayana not to organize, but to remain united. And it's very important because the regimes all over the world understand organized sectors. But unorganized sectors, they do not understand. I mean, that was one major shortcoming in the demonetization that we saw, that the unorganized ones were not taken into account. Because taking them into account is not known to the regime. Therefore, I suggested that be united but not be organized. We are thinking of transforming Dakshinayana movement into a very vast, open multiversity. Whatever does not happen in the university will happen through the medium of writers, thinkers, artists in the society. That is the idea. And this will be spread over about 5 states to begin with: Telangana, Karnataka, Goa, Maharashtra and Gujarat to begin with. There we have a great opportunity to invest in ideas like democracy. But today our democracy is what Chomsky and his senior colleague said was manufactured consent, and what Arun Jaitley said, manufactured dissent. When writers returned awards, that was the phrase. But if democracy is resting on manufactured consent and manufactured dissent, then democracy gets eroded or corroded. Actually, if you look at the aesthetics of protest, we notice that a lot of it appears like manufactured dissent. If you look at the dynamics of power, all of it appears like manufactured consent. We need to take democracy beyond this manufacturing of consent and dissent, and that means we must engage with the idea of manufacturing itself. How thought is manufactured, how it is controlled, how it is negotiated. I think it becomes a wonderful challenge, a great opportunity for writers to rise above our ideological what a great Marathi writer called Wada, custody, confined, and actually look at thought, thinking, rationality, quest, questioning differently in our time. And therefore all of us need to be Tukarams or Kabirs or Miras of our time. I know I'm taking rather too much time, but I want to add one line. Democracy itself needs transformation. But what we have is a majority model of democracy drawn from the British, where you need to have more than 50% share of support in the parliament. On the floor of the parliament or assembly, more than 50%. There is a second model, which is plurality model of democracy, which works in the United States, where a fellow can become a president even if he has less than 50% support. And that model is developed in America in order to keep the federation of the states intact, to manage their, their interests, balance their interests. We now need to move to a new model of democracy, which is democracy not by majority, by plurality, but diversity. I say this because even now, the present regime has 31% vote share of the votes polled, but of the total population of the country, 18 crores voted for the present party to be in power out of 130 crore population in the country. That is a vast range of minorities. I am not talking of religious minorities. It could be linguistic, cultural, food minority, geographical, all kinds of minorities. They left outside the gamut of democracy in the country. And that is so with Egypt, that is so with Turkey, that is so with Russia more than India, that's so with Ukraine. I think all over the world a new model of democracy needs to emerge, which is democracy based on diversity. There Indian writers can contribute immensely because there is no other country in the world which understands diversity better than India does. Thank you.
Precisely in this diverse society for which we evolved ways of understanding diversity, there is genuine alarm about fascism. So when you're responding to these things, so what are the intellectual resources that you will want to use in trying to, because Arshia, this is a genuine struggle within myself actually, because this language of rights and that looking for the state to offer you rights to be able to write the way you want, that's definitely a precious way of thinking about things. But fascism, as we know, doesn't abide by those rules. And to engage in those instincts will require, bhakti is just one sort of moral reservoir you can point to that constantly asks you to set aside your ego, which is important to do, encountering these sorts of things. But I'm just asking,
the answer that I have in my mind, and I have not been able to think of a better answer to your question. Therefore, I am presenting the one that I have at the moment. When we were thinking of how to fight the British, the Empire, Gandhi said, we cannot fight them by becoming like them. If they are fighting us with guns and swords, we cannot pick up guns and swords and fight them. We will have to free ourselves within our hearts. That was the argument in that little book, Hind Swaraj. If we have to fight fascism, we cannot shape ourselves in the image of fascism. I mean, they have employed 300,000 trolls. We cannot fight them by employing 400,000 trolls. Probably we'll have to say, even if you troll us, we are what we are, fearless, if necessary, ready to die, to go to prison, ready to be silenced. Even silence can become speech. In fact, Gandhi used mauna as some kind of protest. I am not saying writers should become silent, please don't misunderstand that. I am saying that we have to be ourselves, fearlessly and true to ourselves. I think in the Bhai, Mauzo, we call him Bhai, said that regional languages are targeted but it is in regional languages that innumerable individuals are writing today, and thanks to the technology publishing today in their own way without worrying about the consequences. There was a 17-year-old Kannada girl, Halli, Deepa, she got an award as young writer. She returned the award. She said, for me, a 17-year-old first award in life, she said, look, she said to me, uncle, truth is more important than this award. If we have that girl in our country, then fascism by its nature has a short run. Because fascism depends on untruth, falsehood, propaganda, terrorizing the subject, victimizing them. And untruth cannot remain legally valid for a very long time. Logic, the nature of language itself, the structure of language naturally does not allow untruth to have a long run, because language makes it collapse. If language is the vehicle of untruth, untruth cannot run a marathon. It can win a short sprint of 300 meters. That's how Hitler went down. That's how Mussolini went down. And this time also, regimes all over the world will collapse, because it is in the nature of language not to allow logic of untruth to last for a very long time. If they stop us from using language altogether, if they say you shall speak only the language of sheep, then it's another. So let us not be sheep, let's be human.
I wish
I am an incurable optimist.
That you are, and you're an idealist too. If you think Hitler lost because of language, I mean, it's an incredible explanation. I mean, World War stories are military story. If the guy hadn't lost and won, it would have been very different. But I take your point that maybe language is resources that will resist, but I still feel as intellectuals trying to fashion response to our president. What sorts of resources might we want to use? I mean, use in this word, but work with.
With the sort of people left, or whatever the label is used to describe people who are at the moment in the forefront of resistance. It's working, yeah. Constantly we are told that one way to confront or to manage the current situation is to engage in dialogue with the people who have less liberal ideas. And I used to think, I'm not interested in dialogue, I have to say that, because I cannot dialogue with a person who thinks that my existence is of no consequence to him or to her. For a person who doesn't believe that I can be a free citizen of this country, where do I even start the dialogue? Yeah? So to that extent, of course, I agree with Devy. Not to that extent, I always agree with Devy. But the resistance has to take new forms, right? And this hackneyed thing of like, oh, we'll talk to each other, we'll see that we're all human beings. No, my humanity has already been denied to me. Where am I going to speak from? And this actually replicates centuries, millennia of the majority culture in India, which is predicated on hierarchy and exclusion, right? So all that, I mean, we are used to excluding people, we are used to denying them their humanity, we are used to denying them their dignity. So we are perpetuating a very, very nasty cycle. So we have to take new forms. Where they will come from, I'm not as optimistic as Devy Saab. I feel actually completely hopeless and not frightened, but I just feel hopeless. I don't see a way out of the situation that we're in now. But at the same time, even as I say I can't see a way out, I know it's because my imagination has at this moment been crushed. Yeah, and that is scary. That is true.
I should have characterized my response better. What I meant was not that we should talk to the fundamentalists, although that would not be a bad idea. What I meant was those large numbers of communities who who understand a certain sort of language, of obligation, of sacrifice, of living austerely, of living humbly, modestly, all these values that are enshrined, and they're not necessarily denominational, and they're not from a particular religion per se, but you find a certain embrace of these values that liberalism just keeps silent. It's about your rights to secure something. No one says, please sacrifice, or it's your obligation to do this, let's live with this. So this kind of response that proceeds with the intelligibility of these things, right now there's a reluctance to even get into that. And in the job of reconstructing intellectual discourse, how do we move ahead in terms of what do we retain?
Well, I see what you're saying, that it is necessary. It will become increasingly necessary for writers to have to possess an organic connection between what they write or write about and their own lives. It will become increasingly necessary for university intellectuals, that is, or even left intellectuals or whatever intellectuals, to establish an organic link between how they live and what they profess. We, for the last 60 or 70 years, thought that thought alone might be autonomous and enough, and need not have an organic link. And many of us who have been preaching equality, economic equality and justice, have actually engaged in accumulating for our own families. That the saint poets did not do, or the Gandhian movement of writers did not actually show that contradiction between their thought and life. Now, this cannot happen by starting ethical preaching or some kind of religious atmosphere, making thought as religion. This can happen because if we actually open up new areas of discussion, and that is areas related to ecology, areas which tell us that the earth is about to come to the end of its resources, and therefore mutual sacrifice will be necessary. So
Pope does that by engaging the religious imagination. The encyclical was about engaging ecological questions through Catholic theology. We had a response there. I'm wondering it's difficult given our secular commitments, but not engaging the religious imagination might not let you access to a largely important area of understanding.
it is difficult. It is not easy. It is difficult, it is full of risks. And therefore, it is very exciting to set out on that journey. The worst is we might fail, but possibly we may not fail altogether. It's possible that even, like Yeats, Ibsen said that history changes every 8 or 10 years. Who knows, within a week's time, 18 December, we might have a slightly different tone, texture in what we're discussing. Let's wait and see what comes.
The response to this, but I must praise Dr. G.N. Devy's optimism. He not only sees rays of light in the surrounding darkness, but he also makes us look through it. And in fact, his optimism is what drives me to go ahead with hope. And I think when we were speaking about democracy, how the present dispensation deals with it, I can give you 2 or 3 examples. A year before, last year, a TV channel in Delhi organized a panel discussion, and many writers who had written the awards were invited to Delhi to participate in the 2-hour-long live discussion in which Professor Devy was there and K.K. Daruwala and many more were there. And in the end we realized the folly of it because it was called Sarkar versus Sahityakar. And it was not to project our views. They only wanted to counter our views with their to humiliate us rather. And so in the end of at the end of 2 hours, before that I remember K.K. Daruwala in protest walked out of it on live television. So this is the way they deal with the protest in democracy. Secondly, you know how the dispensation at the center would change the direction of the Goa's election results. So that shows how democracy is looked at by this dispensation. And then, if nothing works, they have Gaudi Ganesh. So this is precisely why I think under PEN International because we are uniting in the name of a fraternity, a writers' fraternity. Not only writers in creative writers, I would say writers who are engaged in other forms of art or journalism or over. So it is very, very important for writers to unite, and this is precisely why this panel discussion is taking place here. I hope the message is carried, and if writers keep uniting, I think we'll be able to forge ahead with our agenda.